Hey guys, it's M4J here, and welcome back to the Majeffries network in OpenTTD. Now we're going to finish off mass transit week, not over here at Sunnington, although Sunnington, I have made a few adjustments. I've added 2 extra platforms here to try and deal with the vast number of trains that are coming in and out of Sunnington station. What I think I've actually done though is made the problem worse. Not 100% sure. We'll have to come back. Well, I'll have to come back and have a look at this. What we're actually doing today is finishing off, or attempting to finish off, some more of Gardcity. Now, let me just look at my episode plan. First of all, is anyone else in the episode plan? They are not. That's good. I did notice a couple of people were checking it out when I was in the middle of editing what today's episode was going to be. That's fine. I've not got a problem with that. That's why I let you guys have a look at it. I'm still not going to make it so people can edit it, because I kind of want to keep the plans to myself in that respect. But I have no problem with people checking it out. I think it's good that we can do that. Be a bit more transparent about things. Anyway, that's not what today's episode is about. Today's episode is about here, Bankside. Now, Bankside is currently the hub for the Circle Line and the South Bank Line. We're going to add to it today. The reason I haven't been providing Reedy with station plans and station lists and things like that, and a copy of the map, is because I hadn't felt like the... That's my phone buzzing. Apologies for that. I hadn't felt like the metro network within this new map was to a good enough standard yet. Having the only 2 lines, a couple of tram lines, but that was it, just the 2 lines. Now, of course, we have got the overground network as well. Why is everything beeping and buzzing when I'm trying to record videos? That's incredibly annoying. Sod's law, I guess. The overground network, yes, that's another part that we have added. In fact, a new part of the overground network, GST, has joined the party. We here have some trains, the BREL, British Rail Engineering Limited, I think it stands for, the Renewal EMU. Now this currently runs a service between GST, and then it follows this branch here, all the way down to its conclusion, right the way over here at Slanningwell, which is quite a long route, I'm sure you'll agree. Plus, we do still have the route that goes all the way around this way and terminates down here at Dinpool. Although the main line is still to come to Dinpool. We have to finish that at some point in the near future as well. One thing I will say, episode 200 is coming up, which is another reason why I was sort of starting to expand the metro a little bit more. So that if Reedy can get it done in time, there's absolutely no pressure on this whatsoever. In case it can't happen, but if Reedy can get the new map done by episode 200, we'll have the new thumbnail. But as I say, there's no pressure. It's my fault that it's been left so long, because I haven't been building the network where I should have been. Therefore, we don't really have much of a metro network even now. With the addition of the overground lines, we still are a little bit lacking. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah, episode 200. So hopefully we can get something done for then, even if I have to reuse the old thumbnail just for a little bit longer. I've no problem doing that. Like I said, it's my fault that it might not be ready in time. And it will definitely be my fault if it isn't ready in time, because I've not been keeping it updated like I should have been. Anyway, we have some more overground lines that I'm going to add in the future. The line down this way also needs to be added. The reason I've delayed that so far, I've rebuilt the train storage facility down here. I do still need to build some waypoints here so that I can get trains running from GSMA down through Shoreham Junction and then down via this line here. Maybe also have some go towards the airport as well, but we already have 3 lines that go to the airport. That's... where is it? This airport over here. Great Winfield. Great Winfield, by the way, since we did the mass transit over here, from Wenfingfield. It's been quite successful. Here's that little line that I mentioned last episode that I was thinking of doing. The main reason is this station's quite big. I was reading an article in my magazine recently about Nottingham Victoria, which I kind of knew about but didn't know too much. I knew of it, I didn't know much about it, if that makes sense. So I read this article and it's quite interesting. It's another great example of how British Railways completely screwed over the future, essentially, which might sound a bit odd to say, but Nottingham Victoria was at the time one of the biggest stations ever built. I'm going to tell this story whilst I actually start doing some building work, because today, or do some planning. Today we're going to build some more metro lines. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why Nottingham Victoria is a good example of how British Rail screwed up the future, whilst I actually do this building work. So Nottingham Victoria opened as part of the London extension of the Great Central Railway, which now no longer exists, but at the time was the newest main line in Britain, right up until that East Coast extension that I mentioned, which I always forget the name of. There's something diversion it was called. Selby? I want to say Selby. Selby diversion? I think it was called that. Let me just pin these here for a second and we'll create a new line. So it was part of the London extension, and it was at the time massive. Like, even compared to modern stations, it was huge. It was built in a hole 50 foot deep, right in the centre of Nottingham, which in itself is quite an achievement. It had a 46 foot high train shed roof, which was originally glazed. I think it had one of the largest structures of its kind at the time as well. And it was just a really good station. It was a joint station, so it was built as a joint venture between the Great Northern and the Great Central Railways. Originally, there was disagreements over what it should be called. Great Central wanted to call it Nottingham Great Central, I believe, whereas Great Northern were obviously opposed to that idea because it didn't include their name. So for a while, they issued tickets with different names until eventually someone in Nottingham, I think it was in their council, suggested that they called it Nottingham Victoria, as it was coming up to the, again, I want to say Jubilee of Queen Victoria. And they agreed, and it was called Nottingham Victoria right up until it was demolished. And that's the key bit. That's where I think they screwed over the future. BR, because it was a huge station. It was built to cope with vast numbers of trains, and when I say vast numbers of trains, I literally mean vast numbers of trains. It was an absolutely ginormous structure, and the whole thing during the 1960s was torn down. The whole thing. Where it used to stand is now, I believe it's called the Victoria Shopping Centre, and I bet the majority of people that go there, there might be a couple of leftover remnants. I know for a fact that there's a clock tower in the one of the entrances of the shopping centre that used to be the main clock tower of the station. But apart from that, you would not know that there was a railway station there once upon a time. And you guys know me by now. I get angry about things like this. I hate people that don't think about the future when they do things. I hate people that just completely disregard even the present day. That's why I'm a huge fan of like the railway preservation movement, because there are people there that genuinely want to keep bits of our history. Okay, it's railways, so it's slightly biased, but they want to keep bits of our history for future generations. And that is something that has never, ever, ever, ever crossed the minds of those that were in charge of British Railways at the time. So, Nottingham Victoria is no more. But it had a really good run while it lasted. As I say, it was a big station. It played a major part during both World Wars. Although World War II, it was severely affected in that it was mostly used for troop trains and the big glazed roofs were actually taken down and replaced with corrugated iron, because even then BR were of the assumption, in fact, was it BR? It wasn't really BR back then. It was only after the war that BR came about. But even then, the people in charge were of the assumption that it doesn't need to be glamorous, which, to be honest, in the war, that would have been a really good sign for morale. And I'm speaking as someone who's never been to war. But how good would that be? I've seen Dunkirk, and there's the bit in Dunkirk right at the end where they're on the train back to home, and they pull into the station. Now, how cool would it have been if you were a soldier back then, you've seen the theatre of war, and you come back to a building of that grandeur, to a hero's welcome? That would make you feel like a king. And yeah, I always despair about things like this, because as I say, I'm a huge fan of the idea of preservation and just holding on to the past. We wouldn't have half of what we had now if it wasn't for the past. In fact, we wouldn't have any of what we had now if it wasn't for the past. If I choose to actually speak sense for a change. So I think it's a great shame that Nottingham Victoria is gone. I also find it quite irritating that of all things that replaced it, it wasn't a building of that much magnitude. It wasn't a hospital, it wasn't a school, it wasn't a council office or anything like that. It was a shopping centre. Of course it was. So I'm a bit irked about that as well. I don't mind shopping centres, I think they have a place in society, but of all the things to replace a station of that magnitude, they chose a damn shopping centre. That just irritates the heck out of me. That really does. Anyway, Wenfingfield, that's what I was talking about. Wenfingfield. So Wenfingfield, I have a real sort of sense of Nottingham Victoria about it. That's why I was rabbiting on about a station that no longer exists. For those of you that are interested, if you go along to the Victoria Shopping Centre in Nottingham, at least they kept the name. I suppose that's better than nothing. But I'm not sure if you can still see it now, but way back when it was sort of first built, there was a car park where if you looked out of one of the sides, you could see one of the original tunnels that actually led into the station. That's railway tunnels that led into the station. I'd have liked it if they'd have even just kept part of the centre as, you know, something to do with the railway history, but they seem to have just completely glossed over that. Almost condemned it to history, really. But yeah, Wenfingfield and Fort Flunwood, they both give me that sense of sort of big junction stations like Nottingham Victoria was. So I'm going to start building some junction lines, possibly off camera, to actually connect those up to other lines. I've already started doing it at Great Winfield, at the airport. There are 2 lines that have come off of that. One of the reasons I've been inspired to do this is, as I said in Monday's episode, something that Zest Husky said that really did speak to me was sometimes when you do the big building projects, you end up losing the personal touch with some aspects of it. And I look back at our network here, and as much as I like this network, I always feel like I'm blowing my own trumpet when I say this, but there are times where I will look back over the network and just think, wow, I built this. There's something about that. It's a real feeling of pride that I get from the fact that, with your guys' help, of course, but I managed to build this entire network. It's something that I originally started the series because I was getting fed up of not being able to find any decent videos on YouTube. The only ones that I could find were either people messing about with the game, building trains and then crashing them, or sort of mini-series like Zest Husky used to do, where it would go on for a few episodes and then it would just stop, and you'd be sat there waiting for the next episode and it would never really come about. So I kind of I felt like the only way that I'd make a series, or the only way I'd find a series that really was about the kind of things that I was interested in, is if I made it myself. And I've probably told this story 100 times before, but I had a couple of goes at making an OpenTTD series, and the first one, to be honest, it's probably got loads of views now, but at the time it bombed. Completely bombed. Nobody watched it. Which is the story of my channel, really. Not many people have watched many of my videos. The only ones that still get watched regularly are the series that I don't make anymore, like Cities in Motion 2. And one of my most frequently asked questions is, when are you bringing that back? And the answer right now is never, because when I did, no one watched it. I took some time off, and then when I came back from that time off, it was almost like I didn't exist anymore. No one watched the video. And that's kind of what happened with OpenTTD as well. So the first attempt was a bomb. The second attempt, I believe it was a live stream I did during my my full-on live streaming days, when I just went mental and live streamed for like 15 hours a day. I had a thing called The Audience Decides, and at one point the audience voted for OpenTTD. I think it was a bit of a biased vote, if I remember correctly, but they voted for OpenTTD. So I uploaded that, thinking, well, if people watched it when I streamed it, they must watch it when I put it on my channel. No views again. And then the third time, I built a network off camera, and I was sort of the mindset of, okay, last try. If no one watches it, we don't make any more. And I uploaded the video, and people watched it, and that was episode 1 of the Jeffries network. And you know, I'm really grateful that people actually tuned into that one. Most of those people that tuned into that one, it has taken them a little while because there are a lot of episodes, but they've caught right up with where we are now, which is a big deal to me. When someone sits and watches one episode that I've made, it means a lot. When someone sits and watches 182 episodes of something that I've made, that really means a lot. So everybody who's watched this far, even if you started yesterday or the day before, whenever it might be, if you're watching this now, let me just build this station really quickly. If you're watching this video now, a huge thank you, because the last attempt was the successful one, as is so often the case in history. So I really am very, very grateful that people did decide that this was the one that they wanted to watch. And I kind of learned every single time I started again, I always did something a little bit different. And the final one, which was the one that got everyone interested, was I didn't start from scratch. I started with an already existing map that I'd already been playing with, but I'd reset everything. And that was my first episode. Anyone who's watched it will know. Those of you who haven't watched it, episode 1 of this series was me with a blank network, essentially. So I'd built a network, I'd built quite a big network, and it was empty. I'd taken all the trains out, the only things that were left were the stations. And we started again. And people liked it. And I know that people liked it because here we are all that time later. I gush a lot about it because it really does mean a lot that I was that close to giving up. There's a lot of times in my life where I've been really, really close to giving up on something, and then something has happened that's made me change my mind, and that was definitely one of them. And I get annoyed sometimes with people's comments, and I feel like sometimes I feel like giving up completely, because I sit there and I think, why do I bother putting all the time and effort into making these episodes just for someone to say your audio's not synced up properly? Like, no one ever notices the good things, but they always notice the bad, and it sounds so stupid. And the reason I've never quit over something like as stupid as that is because I know it's stupid, and I know that I'd be giving up something that I really, really enjoy because someone who really didn't deserve the forum to say it decided to be negative. And that's why. Beat the haters. That's how it works. That's how my mind works anyway. It's the reason why I've always stuck with my channel and never really let anyone dictate what videos I should and shouldn't make. And I stay with that as well. That's always something important for people to remember. Anyone out there who's a YouTuber and gets to that point where you're just fed up of the criticism, just remember it's your channel, not theirs. It always makes me feel better, just knowing that if they really want to moan, they can go watch someone else's channel. I'm sort of at the point now where if someone moans sort of out of the blue, and I kind of wanted to mention this in today's episode anyway, so I'm kind of glad that I accidentally stumbled upon it. But if someone in the comments section notices there's a problem with the audio, then tell me there's a problem with the audio. That's fine. 99% of the time, I'm either aware of the fact that there's a problem and I'm already kicking myself over it, or as soon as someone tells me about it, I start kicking myself over it, because it's such a stupid mistake to make when I've been doing this channel for 5 years. But, and this is a big but, if I feel someone is just being deliberately negative for the sake of it, or has criticised me one too many times, shall we say, and I've had a few run-ins with people in the past. There was one incident where someone called me unprofessional. That's now been resolved, thankfully. But at the time, it wasn't particularly pleasant. There's other times where people have just annoyed me. Most of the time, I say that, you know, this is the line, don't cross it. And generally, it tends to improve after that. But I have a new policy now where if someone is deliberately negative or just goes on and on and on about something that really doesn't matter, asks stupid questions, and it turns out there is such thing as a stupid question, and I get asked it relatively commonly. Like if someone asks why I haven't listed how many cores my processor has, it's because I don't know and I don't care either. You know, I bought parts to make a computer. I bought parts that were recommended to me by someone who knew what they were talking about. I built the computer myself, because as an ex-engineer I do know how to use my hands, and the PC worked, and that's all that matters. So when someone asks me a really specific question like that, just out of the blue, I'll try and answer it. When it's someone who's constantly asked me why questions all the time, I will get to the point where I will start looking at ways to stop them from commenting on my videos. That'll be phase 1. Phase 2, God, that's a small town. I think we'll go random for the next ones. Phase 2 will be a ban from the channel, so you won't be able to watch any uploads. And that's a state that I never really wanted to get into when I started my channel. But I'm at the point now where I don't want to say I don't care, because that's not a very positive thing to say, but I'm at the point now where the criticism itself doesn't bother me. It's just the fact that someone had the brashness to attempt it. So I don't want people like that watching my videos. I don't want people like that talking with my viewers, because who needs that kind of negativity in life? So phase 2 is a ban. The way that you can get the ban lifted is quite simple. And again, this might sound a little bit harsh, but I've had people criticize me, and I've checked out their channels, and they have uploaded a total of zilch. So if you find yourself banned from the channel, first of all, check with me that it's a legitimate ban, because if it isn't, I'll happily reverse the decision, or unban, because I don't want people banned for no reason. Second of all, if you are one of those people that have been banned and it's a legitimate ban, there's a very simple way that you can get yourself unbanned, and that is you will have 24 hours, so about the same amount of time it takes me to turn around a video from concept to publishing, although it takes me about half of that now because I've managed to refine the process. But to you guys, 24 hours to create a video, upload it onto your channel. And originally I was going to say 0 mistakes, but I'm going to reserve that for people that are really negative, because that is quite harsh. 0 mistakes is very harsh. Even I make mistakes now, and as I say, I've been doing this for 5 years. But make a video and upload it on your channel, and just see how hard it is to create a video in a short space of time on a budget that's the square root of 0. And that's all I ask. And the reason I ask that is I don't think people realise sometimes that this isn't easy. It's a lot easier than some jobs, granted, and I feel very lucky that I live in a time where I can do this. But at the same time, and this is a crucial point for me, there are people out there that just don't seem to get how hard it can be at times to produce videos like this. So all I ask is they do the same. 24 hours to produce a video and upload it to their channel. I'm not going to criticize it. I'm probably going to watch it because, you know, it'd be nice to know that the person actually did it rather than just me take their word for it. But for me, it's a wake-up call. It's a chance for people to realize that it's not easy to just make a video. It's not easy to even just think about a video. Again, people who've been on my planning list recently, this video in particular, I gave myself loads of time to record it. Mondays and Wednesdays episodes were recorded well over a week before they were uploaded, which is why I took the second week off. This episode is late in comparison to those. I'm actually recording this on, what day is it today? Monday night, which still sounds like plenty of time, but I've had this episode in the pipeline for well over a week, and I'm at the stage now where I'm only just recording it. And the reason it's taken so long is because I've constantly changed my mind about what I wanted this episode to be about, and that's not always a good thing. When you're dithering like that, it's normally one of two reasons. First reason is you are genuinely stuck, which is fine, it happens, people get over it. Second reason is you're in a position where you don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over again, and that's where I was starting to feel like this series was going towards. The reason I ended Cities in Motion 2, there's two reasons. The first one is no one watched it when I came back from the hiatus, after everyone nagging at me to upload a video. So I did, I came back, I uploaded the video, nobody watched it. That for me was almost like a semi-punishment for those that kept asking me to upload the video, because I just thought, okay, you didn't watch it, I'm not going to make any more. And anyone that's asked me since, they get that as their answer, because I made the video, nobody watched it. Which is kind of petty, but at the same time, it's kind of how I feel, because once again, I sort of let the negativity take over, gave the people what they wanted, even though I really wasn't feeling it, and it was quite obvious that I wasn't feeling it. But no one would know that I wasn't feeling it when they watched the video, because nobody watched the video. So that's what happened there. Why am I always being so negative at the moment? I guess it's because everything around us is so negative at the moment, and everything on my channel is getting really negative as well. We did have a comment come through on the video just now, actually, so that person might be lucky enough for me to read the comment out live on, well, it's not live, you know what I mean, in a video is what I meant to say. It's not live at all, that would be a bit weird. I'm coming to you live. Right, I've put a little depot here. I was going to reuse the one over towards Bankside, but actually, excuse me, actually I think this one's going to be best done over here to start with. In the future, I might move it back. But at the moment, we're just going to operate from here. Right. Now, this is going to be a two-pronged thing. First of all, we're going to use the add trans, because they're going to be a lot faster. Even though it's a maximum speed of 40 within the city itself. Where's tube carriage? Where is tube carriage? I bet I've missed it. I always struggle to find it. There it is. Let's check that comment, actually, because I did say in the past I'd always read a comment when it comes through. So I'll just wait for that to load. Paul Ryan, have you turned off the ability for towns to spawn roads? Sadly, I didn't do this, so the towns grow over my tracks, causing the odd bus crash. I haven't stopped the towns from growing themselves. What I have done is stopped them from building level crossings. So if you go into the settings, somewhere on here, yeah, towns are allowed to build level crossings. That's switched off for that exact reason that you've just said there. Too many crashes caused by level crossings. Also, you end up with ridiculous ones where, like here, there's obviously no place for the road to expand, but the town still does that, which is so pointless and very unrealistic. So I turned that off. Yeah, Yeah, shall I stop being negative about everything? I keep saying that, but then something else comes up that makes me be negative again. And it's not deliberate. I don't try and be negative. I do just get fed up sometimes, like everyone would, I imagine. So that's the new rule that I'm bringing into the channel. The 24-hour rule, I'm calling it. Some people might say it's harsh. I think it's fair. Because I always think, if you're going to criticize someone, you should at least have a go at it yourself first. And that's kind of what this is. This is my way of saying, you're allowed to criticize my videos like everybody, but I'm just curious to see, after the 6th time that you've criticized something that I've done because it wasn't to your liking, whether or not you actually can do it the way you want to do it as well. So that's my test. My 24-hour test. Right, let's plan out this route, because I need to show you where it's going to go. Need to put a waypoint there. Okie dokie, you are no loading, no unloading. I can close my phone down as well. I've had a couple of other questions while I've been off air, most of which I've answered. The one about where I get my music from, that's something I should put. I'm considering redoing my website this summer, because I've been considering redoing it since I made the last version of it, but motivation has been one of the problems with that. I like my website. I think it's very helpful for answering people's questions. I do think if you're going to ask me a question, always check the website first. I think the link is always in the description as well, so there's no excuses. It is just it's motivation and inspiration. I do find it hard sometimes to think of new ideas to put on there, but one of them I do want to do is an FAQ page, specifically for people that are asking me questions. So if you want to know about my new GRFs, they are all actually they need to be updated as well, thinking about it, but the ones I was using on the previous map, they're all on my website on the downloads page. As far as I'm aware, the download is safe because I checked it and virus checked it and everything like that before I uploaded it. But you might want to check that as well, just in case. It's always nice to have a second opinion. But yeah, that is one part of the website thing. The other part is I would like to put an upload page on there. So as long as people use it sensibly and don't give me a reason to take it down again, I would quite like to provide a forum where people can, if they wish, upload images and videos of their own save files and their own maps. I think that'd be quite a cool thing. But that's entirely dependent, as I say, on whether people can behave, because not everybody does, unfortunately. So yeah, there's that. I keep starting to talk about something and then forgetting about it, so you'll have to forgive, because see, there's a good example. It's because I'm building and talking at the same time. Never goes well. Something else I should point out, the South Bank line will remain the South Bank line, even though there will end up being several lines that run through South Bank. Just like there are several lines that run through there's 3 lines that run through Victoria. There's now quite a few lines that run through both Waterloo and Baker Street, and same with Piccadilly Circus, and you know, all the places where the lines used to get their names from have now got plenty of lines running through them. This line is going to go this way via Bankside Valley, which I'm going to rename Bankside East. If you know what Bankside and Bankside East are references to, then congratulations, you do know the tube map after all. For those of you that don't, I'm going to count to 10 so that those that do can chuckle to themselves and go, ha, good reference. And those that don't, just wait a while, because I don't want someone to comment and then I just say it and it turns out they waited for me to say it and then commented, because that's just, I mean, who does that? I said in the past about the Google people that obviously look things up on Google. I stand by that. It's obvious to me that if you're going to present something in the comments and then try and pass it off as your own knowledge, it's probably not a good idea to post a link to a website, because as far as I'm aware, most people that know things don't then write their own websites about it just for a video. Some people write their own blogs and stuff, and I'm one of those people. That's fine. That's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is, if you want to be a smart ass in my videos, it's probably not a good idea to then post a link to the website where you got the information from, because that just tells me you don't know it. You had to look it up. I could be wrong, but there's no way of me knowing when the facts state the opposite. What am I building here? I'm building another metro line, and I probably should have mapped this one out as well. This is the second part of this line, which is going to link up. It's pretty much going to run alongside this main line here, so it is going to link up with the overground line here. And then, in fact, at this point, it is probably just going to run alongside this line to a point, via a couple of extra stations, of course, which I will come to. Funnily, we'll go past there, and then we'll skip over onto this side again, and I think we will terminate down here at a new station at Nuthall. But yeah, comment wars. That seems to be my thing these days, is just not actively arguing with people in the comments, but getting more and more annoyed at people's conduct in the comments. It's just so unnecessary. That's what upsets me the most, is it's so unnecessary. People don't have to be like that. I don't know what points they're trying to prove, but it certainly isn't winning me over. It's just making me more and more annoyed, and to the point where I've introduced the 24-hour rule. But actually, the 24-hour rule was originally spawned by what I was talking about with the website. I do want people to get involved. That's why I have my ideas list. That's why I have... this line's going the wrong way. It's why I have my ideas list. It's why I have, you know, I have the naming ideas. I ask you guys to leave suggestions in the comments for what you'd like to see in future episodes. It's why I do it. It's partly because I don't always have the ideas myself. I wouldn't say laziness. I think that's very, you know, that's a very harsh way of putting it. I consider it to be lazy myself, as in I call myself lazy sometimes because I can't think of new ideas. But there are genuinely times where you run out of ideas. It happens. It's kind of how you deal with that. So my way of responding to running out of ideas at times is opening the doors up to you guys and actually saying, what do you want to see? I think that's one of the reasons in the past why I've not exactly won over viewers as well. It's because I've been doing something that people don't necessarily engage with, and when that happens, you're not going to really want to watch it. And I totally understand that, and that makes a lot of sense. It's why I do it, essentially, and I'll keep saying that. It's why I do it. It's so that you guys can be involved. Yeah, so the 24-hour rule was I wanted to see what you guys had been making, as a genuine interest of mine. I'm always interested in seeing what people are doing. It's where my originality with YouTube came from. Originality? I suppose that's the right word. It's where my origin story begins, let's say, in that I wanted to see what other people were doing, because I had some ideas for my own private projects that I was working on. One of which is currently coming to fruition. Anyone who watches Global Ventures, which again isn't that many, to be honest, not received as well as I thought it might have been, but there's no point moaning about that on here because it's a different video and a different series. But trying to get inspiration for that, trying to get inspiration for this, it was getting difficult. So I wanted to see what other people were doing, and no one was doing anything that was of that particular interest. I always hate it when I express this more in my Global Ventures series, but people misusing games. I used to always look up Rollercoaster Tycoon 3 ideas, or trying to get ideas on that game, and the number of times I would see people build a death park, which is essentially you build a theme park with rides that just crash and kill people, and they find that fun for some reason. And these are the kinds of people that are going to be running our futures someday, so that's reassuring. But I had that at the station site, but that's way too close. But, yes, big but, there was just nothing of interest. And I really felt disappointed when I saw so many people have created so many cool GRFs for OpenTTD, but no one was using them in YouTube videos. And no one was sort of giving them the credit that they deserved, giving them the run out that they deserved, because they're really, really good. Some of them are complete game changers, which is what I love about OpenTTD. Is I grew up loving Transport Tycoon, but hating some of the features. One of the big things for me about OpenTTD that has made the game so much easier to play for me is path signals. It's such a simple thing. Some people might not even realize that it wasn't in the original game. Unless my memory is letting me down, it wasn't in the original game. And it was so frustrating, because your trains would get to a point where if there was another train just within the vicinity, it doesn't matter whether it was actually in the way of your train or not, just if it existed somewhere in the path of where your train needed to go, your train would just stop. And it would just sit there and wait until eventually the train that was in the way was no longer in the way. But that could take hours sometimes, depending on the levels of your network. And that was incredibly frustrating. So when I saw that the path signals were a thing in this game, first of all I didn't quite know what they were, so I did have to do a little bit of research there. Once I realised that it's the sort of the missing key, the missing link in what was making the game frustrating for me, it was an eye-opener. I downloaded the game immediately when I found out what path signals were, and it really is a game changer. It's made the experience of OpenTTD so much more enjoyable, and that's why whenever I think I found a bug in the game, and people have said this to me as well, why don't you say something? Half the time it's because I don't want to say something, because I know, never done it myself, but I know that these things are not easy to make. Someone has spent a long time creating a new GRF, and yeah, they should know if there's a bug in it, but I'm not going to tell them in a way that it sounds like I'm complaining, because genuinely I'm not. I think these GRFs are incredible, even the ones that I'm using right now. Whoops. You know, I'm using extra industries, different train types, different, you know, plane types, boat types, all of that kind of stuff, and they're just the bare essential sort of aesthetic ones. Then there's ones that actually change what the game does in the background. Half the time you don't even notice the changes that it's making, but it is making them, and it's making the game more enjoyable. I don't want to complain when someone's put their heart and soul into something like that, and especially when it's not even broken necessarily, because I can't prove right now that that is what's wrong with the game. Like a few episodes ago we had the game crashing every time I was trying to remove that order. I have no way of knowing whether that was a GRF that was causing that or not. I've read the bug reports, and as usual with software and myself, when it comes to bug reports, I can't make heads or tails of it. Someone else out there probably will. And to be honest, that person is probably then the person that's going to say something to the creator, and I don't have a problem with that, because they know what they're talking about and I don't. It's kind of another reason why I get upset about some people's comments, is because they don't know what they're talking about half the time. It is just, you know, firing into the wind and eventually you might hit something. It's a load of old nonsense, and it irritates the heck out of me. Right, that's going to be our new terminus. So you can see here it's a bit of a snake going through here just so it can connect up with this. I would say originally the line would have come round and just gone round this way, but the sort of fake mythology that we create with this network, they added a little extension to link up with Dinpool, kind of like a DLR type extension, where Friday it went this way and then Saturday it went the next way. That's what always amazes me. I say this a lot about the DLR as well. It always amazes me just how fast the turnaround times are on some of those projects. Like the station closes on the Monday. Bad example. Station closes on the Friday, and by the Monday the new station's opened. That's incredible. Doesn't matter what it is. That's incredible. Yes, they would have built it in the meantime. It's not like they built it in 3 days, but the fact that it's built with that sort of turnaround time in mind, I always find that fascinating. I could talk for hours about why I love the DLR. Even though I actually don't like riding on the DLR, I always find it just... It's kind of one of these things where I prefer to stand at the side and marvel at it rather than actually be on it. And even the times where I have gone on it for pleasure rather than for travel, I've always sort of just wanted to get off at the next station and just stand and watch it. I'm one of those kind of people. It's always... Whenever I used to say I was interested in railways, people assumed I was interested in just trains. But I like trains. I think trains are incredible. Steam especially. Which is why I was talking about preservation. I don't like diesel preservation groups because I'm not interested in diesels. But I think they're just as important to our history as steam. Which is why I don't have a problem with the fact that they're being preserved as well. Anyway, because I used to say I like railways, people assumed I just like trains. But I don't. I like the whole thing. Which is why I spend a lot of time building these realistic looking networks. Because to me, this is just as important as all the other stuff. You've got to make it realistic, otherwise what's the point? And I stand by that with everything that I do. All my series, you'll always hear me say the word realism. And you'll always you'll always see me try and be as realistic as possible in all of my builds. Because what's the point otherwise? If you're setting out to do something that's fictional, and not necessarily realistic, then fair enough. One of my new pet peeves is to do with Planet Coaster, so I should probably save it for a Planet Coaster video, but I'm talking about realism here, so I might as well mention it here. Is a particular YouTuber who I will not name because I don't want to get into a war of words with anybody, but I'm a fan of theirs. I think they make good videos. They're theme park related videos. They have a series on Planet Coaster where they constantly drop the R-bomb. They are always talking about realism this and realism that. And yet, they don't block section their coasters, which is the most unrealistic thing you can do in that game. And it's a real pet peeve of mine, because they talk about realism and how everything should be built accordingly. And then they don't do that one simple thing. And my blood boils when I see that, because it's the double standards sort of effect of you can't talk about realism when you yourself aren't being realistic. It just does not work. The whole concept falls flat on its face then. I mean, I'm going to talk about this a lot in the future as well. And it's another reason why the 24-hour rule is a thing. Because sometimes people just need to take a step back and actually think about what they've said. And think about whether it makes sense. Like, don't talk about realism when you yourself are being unrealistic. It's something I always try and do. And it's something I always try and bite my tongue with as well, because I don't want to be hypocritical. Should I connect that to that? No, I won't. I don't want to be hypocritical, because who does? That's just not... Feels funny. Feels funny being hypocritical. But, in fact, it's not even a but, because, you know, one of the reasons I spend so long working on some of these projects, in this series in particular, and one reason why I'm always redoing things, like I'll build something and then I'll go, oh, actually that doesn't look right, and I'll do it again. And there must be people clawing at the screen in frustration, wondering why I do that. But because it doesn't fit in with the ethos that I always present in my videos, and that is realism. I'm trying to build things that could actually exist in the real world. And some of the things I've built, I'll be the first one to admit that they wouldn't exist in the real world. And that's why I tear them down and do them again. Because you want something that, whoops, like that for example. That was just a misclick, so easy to fix. But you want something that is consistent throughout. You don't want to talk about things in one episode and then 2 episodes later you're doing the opposite, because no one wants that. You know, it doesn't fit in with the, as I say, the ethos that I'm creating in this series. I want to be as realistic as possible. I also want to use inspiration from real life places and real life things, which is why I talk about these real life places and real life things, because they mean a lot to me personally most of the time if I talk about them. Although not so much with the majority of stuff, because I wouldn't say I've ever been truly at a stage in my life where you know, like I wasn't around during the 60s. I don't really know what it was like when Beeching released his report. There are people out there that would have been incredibly saddened by that report. I personally would not know because I wasn't alive. But I imagine if I had been alive then, I would be on the same side as the protesters. I would be standing there saying, why is this happening? And that's one of the reasons why I like to do my videos the way I do them. It's because I like to use the real life inspiration. I like to talk about what I'm doing on screen. It's one of the things I would say makes me quite, not unique, but it's one of the main principles of my channel is I try and talk through my ideas with the people that are watching, so you guys, so that you can understand where it is I'm coming from. Because I do get that sometimes I would do something like demolishing these two houses and people would say, well, why have you done that? And the simple reason, and the simple answer is so I can build a bridge across this track to connect up to this town over here. That's a simple answer. The long answer is because there are certain aspects of this game that do still annoy me. Like the fact that you put a town slightly in the wrong place and it affects absolutely everything that you're trying to do. That's not where I wanted to build that. There. But yeah, I'm talking about a mishmash of things today, and kind of reflects on the fact that I haven't made that many videos recently. I think that's fairly obvious. And the ones that I have made have been very mismatched in terms of not so much the quality of the video itself, because it's consistent throughout, but the quality of my conversational topics is a bit mishmash. And for the last 2 episodes I have had some topics listed that I wanted to talk about and just never found a way really to segue them in, because I've been talking about other things, as is the Majeffrey's way, it seems, or the M4J way as it now is. No, I was wondering whether to build a station there or not, but I don't think I need to. That one I don't need. I need one here. Did I say station? I meant town. This is kind of a novel way for me to do things as well now. Build the stations first and then just build the towns around the places where there are no towns, but there's a station. So yeah, my conversational topics today, as they have been throughout the whole week, and I've just never talked about them, are... Originally it was just tramways outside of London, because we were working with tramways, but now it's going to be most mass transit outside of London. So there's a lot, believe it or not. It's one of these things where, again, you know about it, but you don't really appreciate it until you sort of see a list. So I did a bit of research for the Monday's episode, and originally it was just for tramways outside of London. For tramways themselves, there aren't that many. And then when it comes to sort of mass transit, it's kind of the blurred line as to what's light rail and what's heavy rail. So if we do it as just light rail is all things that aren't the national network, essentially. Maybe with the exceptions of London Underground and London Overground, because they are technically full-size trains. But things like Merseyrail, again, they use full-size trains, but I would consider Merseyrail more of a light rail system these days because of kind of its infrastructure. In the centre of Liverpool, it's underground, which, yes, there are underground network rail stations as well, but I just think if I was to classify Merseyrail, I'd classify it as light rail. But each to their own on that one. The Metro in Newcastle, again, I would class that as light rail, even though you could technically class that as heavy rail. Again, it's sort of a matter of personal opinion. It's quite a long line. I'm also wondering what to call this line. But let's focus on the obvious ones. So, Croydon Tramlink, that is technically in London, although Croydon is a town outside of London. Manchester Metrolink, Midland Metro, which is Birmingham, Wolverhampton. I nearly said Coventry, but I know it's not Coventry. Solihull, I think it goes. Solihull. I can never say that word. There are certain places. I'm British through and through, born and bred in Britain, but there are still place names in Britain that I just can't say. And I imagine that's the same with everybody. I'm part Welsh as well, and yet when I go to Wales, it's all lost on me. It's a shame, really, because I think Welsh is quite a nice language, but I can't speak it, I can't understand it, and I certainly can't read and write in it. So, there you go. Sometimes your origin doesn't necessarily speak about your heritage, if that makes sense. And vice versa as well. Your heritage doesn't necessarily speak well of your origin. What was the other one? Nottingham trams. Quite fitting since we started the episode talking about Nottingham. And also the Blackpool trams. Although I can't remember what they're actually called now. It's called something else. And I was horrified because I used to always think of Blackpool trams as the old heritage trams that run along the Golden Mile. And yet, I've looked now. I think it is just called Blackpool Tramways. They're all modern trams, and I had a horrible realization when I looked in my magazine one day and saw that, because it really was like a bubble bursting. I honestly thought, well, I didn't honestly think, I knew that there would be some kind of modern implementation of the trams, but I always thought that there would be still heritage trams run regularly, and they kind of are, but not to the same extent. Like, they are still run, but mostly just as a heritage thing. So they'll run every so often, every now and then, and that's it. So that was kind of a sobering moment as well. So yeah, I've had a few of those realization moments growing up, realizing that the world is actually a horrible place, and why would anyone want to live in it? No, I'm kidding. That's not what I'm realizing. But just realizing that how I used to perceive things isn't always how that they actually are. So Blackpool trams was a really good example of that, because every single piece of media that I used to see to do with Blackpool trams was the old-fashioned double-decker ones with the flashing lights and, you know, all the bells and whistles looking really, really glamorous. And it turns out that the modern trams are just like the ones that run everywhere else in the country. Speaking of everywhere else in the country, I think that's it. I think there's 5 major tram systems in the country. I think I listed them all. Croydon, Manchester, Birmingham, Nottingham, Blackpool. Yes. Bath have recently stated that they're going to look into the possibility of a tram system, which I think is going to be quite cool if they bring that in, because it's a Roman town. So it'd be really interesting to see the way they implement sort of modern day trams into an old styley, I think I've done this wrong, into an old styley city. So a bit like with Edinburgh. I suppose Edinburgh counts as well if we're talking about Britain. England, it is just those 5 that I mentioned. Plus, I think if we're going to go into the UK, should I mention the distinction between England, Britain and the UK? I think I should. It's something that we Brits have kind of had to learn as well. Calling someone British doesn't necessarily mean they're from England, as we all know, because you can be Welsh, Welsh, English and Scottish and be British. But UK also includes Northern Ireland, so you'll always see it written as the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The Northern Ireland is not part of Great Britain, but it is part of the UK. If there's any of my American friends watching this, they're probably sort of gasping in horror right now, the fact that it's not, again, what they perceived. But that's kind of the fun of this whole thing. We're always learning, we're always evolving. It's always really cool. Should I put a waypoint here as well? I think I should. I need to pin this, which also means I need to put one down the other end as well, which is going to be great. This is not all. isn't it? There. Like so, and then if I follow this line all the way to the other end,